Have you ever wondered what life as a government official, life as a bureaucrat is really like? Not the way it's presented in the media, not the way you see it described by politicians or senior retiring bureaucrats, not the way it's shown in TV shows like Yes Minister or Utopia or The Diplomat or Parks and Recreation even, as it is seen by real bureaucrats like me. That's why I've written 13 ways of looking at a bureaucrat, and that is what I'm going to tell you about in this video. Good books about bureaucrats, about bureaucracy, are actually really hard to find. I've looked all my life as I've tried to find books that describe this life that I've lived over 3 decades as a bureaucrat. Yes, there's Kafka. Yes, there's lots of satires. Yes, there's academic theories and political theories. There's ideas about technocracy. There's ideas about elite theory. There's ideas about rent seekers and all sorts of other things, but they tend to present more or less theoretical caricatures of bureaucracy. They don't present you the life of the bureaucrat in the voice of the bureaucrat, and that's what I tried to do in 13 ways of looking at a bureaucrat. So many of these books and theories and television shows present an image of bureaucrats as lazy, corrupt, stupid, and incompetent. Fair enough. I like a good laugh too. But I was a bureaucrat for 33 years, and most of the people I encountered were not like that. I wasn't like that. Sure, I had my flaws and my faults. I made many mistakes. But I took my job seriously. I approached it intelligently and ethically. I tried to do the right thing. I tried to understand the world that I was operating in and the world outside, the worlds that we were trying to govern within the bureaucracy. But I just could not find a good book that really described the true, authentic experience that I was having, and that presumably thousands and thousands and thousands of other government officials around the world have too. So I decided to write that good book myself. And that is what 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat is. Now, don't get me wrong. It is not an apology for all the bad things that bureaucracy has done over the years. In fact, it's quite a brutal assessment of government today. If you think government looks messy from the outside, wait until you read what I write in 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat, what government looks like from the inside. But I wanted to share this sometimes brutal, candid, sometimes amusing, sometimes thoughtful assessment of government today with the outside world. The world outside the bureaucracy, who could perhaps come to understand this important institution better. I think it's important that we have a more open discussion in our societies about what our bureaucracies are like and what our democracies are really like. And some of the best witnesses of our political institution are actually those public servants, but they so often have had the cone of silence brought down upon them. So that's why I wanted to share my stories, my writings on governing, and perhaps persuade a few of you that there is a way to be a better bureaucrat, that there is a way to actually govern well. I have not betrayed any state secrets here. There will be things in the book that surprise you perhaps and might even shock you. I've tried to be frank. I've tried to be fearless. I have admitted my own uncertainty about what is going on in government and democracy today. I have admitted my many mistakes and, in a way, tried to give an honest autobiographical account of my long journey through the bureaucracy and my long search for the truth of what power really is, and is there a way to use it well. I talk about many of the things that I did in government. I talk about writing speeches for political leaders. I talk about leading alcohol and drug policy for quite a few years during some very turbulent times. I talk about arranging redress and responding to the trauma of people who had been abused during their childhood in churches and other institutions. I talk about advising on the organisation of government, not something that you often hear openly discussed in the public domain. I talk about social policy issues that I advised on: mental illness, ageing, and violence. And of course, it wouldn't be complete without my reflections on the last few years of my government career, some of which was spent in the health bureaucracy during the COVID pandemic. I also talk about about what's going on in our democracies. And to be honest, they seem to be in trouble. People talk about political decay, people talk about political disintegration and political disorder, but so often it's journalists talking about that or politicians talking about that. Often when people talk about politics, though, they talk about the optics and how the media story is being sold, about the political theatre of it all, about the competition between Team Red and Team Blue, who is winning the horse race for one or other position, who is winning the ratings war in the media show of politics. That's all well and good, but for me, governing is a much more serious business. And most of that serious business of what really goes on in the life of a government official, what really is the work of bureaucracy in government, is not covered in the media. And it's not covered in many theories about politics, many commentaries about politics. I've tried to shed at least my perspective on what I observed about those realities. I could see how often the media would get what was really going on fundamentally wrong every day. I knew how disorganized everything was, backstage, behind the front stage of the performance of politics. I write about the politicization of the public service. I write about the decay of leadership abilities that so many people complain about across, Western liberal democracies. The domination of institutions of power by networks of private interests, of consultants, advisors, and the media. I hope in this book to make clear how much today politics and government have become a kind of virtual reality. They live in their own bubble. The Canberra bubble is this little weird environment all by its own. And in becoming a virtual reality, it has become disconnected from the life world of most people and from the real job of governing, the real job of lowly bureaucrats, such as I was. I hope this book will help you understand that politics and governing are not the same. You cannot really understand the world of government unless you stop being distracted by the daily sideshow of politics as it is performed in the media. Democratic politics was for a long time a way to connect politics and governing, self-governing, and doing it well. But over the last 30 to 40 years, in my judgment, in my direct eyewitness testimony, the institutions and culture of democratic politics have decayed. They have got genuinely worse, to the point that many people even wonder if we still live in a democracy. I think those people might be right. And this is not just a cranky old opinion. This is the view of someone who has witnessed these changes firsthand since joining the public service in 1990. Especially, one has to wonder about that after the challenges of the last few years since 2020. It got to the point really for me, and I describe this as honestly as I can, and as in all the ambivalence that I experienced about it as well in my book. It got to the point for me where I really felt that I had to leave government behind. I had to leave what I call the maze of power. And that is the story I tell in this book. I share my thoughts that I wrote down over 30 years to try to make sense of this special form of conduct, which is governing. We might not like the state, we might not like the government, the party in power, the leaders in power, the elites. But if there were no government, if we were not governed, society would break down. So the question then becomes, how do we do it well? And how do flawed people like me, like every politician, like every public servant that ever lived, how do we, despite our flaws, build cultures and institutions of government that can compensate for those weaknesses? That is the question at the heart of my book. And to answer that question, we need to leave behind stereotypes of bureaucrats, stereotypes of government, and we need to find at least 13 ways of looking at a bureaucrat. The title of the book comes from a poem by Wallace Stevens, 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. It's a brilliant poem that is about how many perspectives there can be to look at a modest, simple, humble thing like a blackbird. And I hope to show you at least 13 ways of looking at that modest, humble, simple person, the bureaucrat. I hope this book helps you discover some new ways of looking at bureaucracy, at looking at government, at looking at bureaucrats, at politics, at working life, and at writing, because after all, for all those 33 years, I kept writing on governing, and at the end of it all, I managed to recover at least a little bit of sense I hope to share with you in this book. It might even offer some ideas, some insights, or to help you imagine ways in which we can govern our societies better. You can buy 13 Ways of Looking at a Bureaucrat, Writing on Governing by me, Jeff Rich, at all good online retail bookstores, Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Noble, Booktopia, and others, I'm sure. Do check it out. And while you're at it, remember you can subscribe to my free weekly newsletter, jeffrich.substack.com. Find out about all sorts of my writing. Find out some of the backstories to my book. Find out what I'm saying and thinking about the ever-changing multipolar world and how we can see the world more clearly with a bit of good world history and a bit of multiple perspectives about bureaucrats, about government, and about the many, many cultures of the world. Do like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.